Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, I just want to ask you one teeny tiny little favor. If you find any value in this episode or have found value in the episodes prior, do us this one tiny favor and refer us to a friend. We are trying to impact as many people as we can within their walks to wealth. And without further ado, I have a very special guest, Lorraine. For anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So my name is Lorraine Beato. I am a realtor, associate broker, investor, author, and speaker. And my elevator pitch is teaching real estate agents how to invest in the thing that they sell every single day.
Yeah. And Lorraine, before you got into doing what you do now, all the success and the speaking and the house selling, tell us a little bit about your walk to wealth. Where did the story take place? Where did it begin?
Oh gosh, it begins in New York. I'm originally from New York, and it began by me reading The Art of the Deal on the train on the way into Manhattan from the suburbs
Mm-hmm.
to go to work. And so I worked on Wall Street. I worked for Merrill Lynch on the mortgage-backed securities trading floor.
Mm-hmm.
So started kind of in real estate way back when I was in college, got licensed when I got out of college. And that book is probably the one that was the most impactful. Of course, living in New York City, and I don't care what side of the fence you're on, but walking by Trump Towers and kind of seeing what he had done and what he had built
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what really got me going. And then we started actually investing ourselves in 2013. So I wish it hadn't taken me as long as it did to start investing in real estate, but we're here now.
Yeah. And making that conscious decision to switch and as you invest in the thing we know best. Tell us a little bit about what made you make that decision and what do you think took you so long to actually make the decision? Because you already were selling houses left and right. What do you think in your mind it kind of like either held you back or might have been a limiting belief, or was it some term that it never came across your mind at all? Tell us a little bit about where your headset was at while you were selling houses in real estate.
Yeah. So we had actually bought 2 rentals. We had done a boot camp here in Atlanta back, I think, God, we moved in 96. So it's probably 97, 98. And we did a boot camp and we bought 2 rentals, and that was kind of all that we did. Then when you fast forward to 2013, we did one of the big guru weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I learned about leveraging, about using other people's money, what hard money is, right? That there's asset-based lending. I didn't know it existed. I had no idea. And so I kind of became the point person for that group here in Atlanta and started working with out-of-state investors. And I started to see, like, I would go to the closing table, I would help them acquire the property. I managed the renovation, and then I put the property on the market, creating my own listing inventory. And when I got out of the closing table, I'd look at my check and I'd look at their check. And I was like, okay, this is like 3 times what I've made. And sorry, my
Mm-hmm.
jaw is cranky. So that's kind of what got me to flip the switch, as I call it. That's the name of my book, Flip the Switch. And so once I learned about leverage, learned how to buy fix and flips properly with the right numbers, because the numbers are key.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of when we started fixing and flipping, I think. So we did that in 2013. We had already done our first fix and flip out of state in 2013. And then after attending that boot camp and learning about leveraging other people's money and hard money, it's kind of when we took off, was probably mid 2014.
Yeah, well, traditionally, what we're taught is you get a loan from the bank, either conventional or FHA, and most people think you have to put 20% down and then you buy a house, and they don't know all the options that are available to them. And tell us a little bit about what is asset-based lending, and why would someone choose that over going the traditional way?
So asset-based lending or hard money lending is they're not your conventional FHA, Fannie Mae loans, right? They're based on the assets. They're based on the credentials of the asset. So your credit does come into play as far as your rate goes, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter if you're employed or not employed. None of your personal history comes into play. They
Mm-hmm.
generally lend anywhere between 65 and 75% of the ARV, of the after repair value. So, for example, if you've got a house that's worth $100,000, they will lend you $65,000 to $75,000, and that's all in. That's your rehab costs, and that's your purchase price. And that's the other thing with hard money lending; they lend you the renovation funds.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that you need not be freaked out about is those interest rates are way higher than a conventional loan. I mean, when we first did our first fix and flip, our hard money loan was 14%.
Mm,
The last couple of years, they've been down to 9 or 10, but it's always going to be more because there's a risk factor, right? They're not taking into account your personal credit. And it's also it's simple interest. So for example, if it's 10%, right? If you're paying 10% and you're in and out of your deal in 6 months, in
mm,
reality, you've only paid 5%, right? So you can do unlimited deals using hard money. Whereas if you're using your personal credit, right, where it takes in your income and you've got to have your down payment for everything, there's only so much you can do before you're kind of capped, before you're maxed out. And that's not the case with hard money loans. As long as the numbers make sense, you are coming to the table with about 10% down. So you do need to remember that. But you're also getting your renovation costs, right? And then they disperse that in what they call draws. And
mhm.
so you can do 4 or 5, 6 projects at a time, where if you were using your own credit, you might only be able to do one.
Yeah, and that definitely helps the ball get rolling. I wanted to ask you too, because what it was like going to that summit, why that changed your life, how that impacted you, and the importance of taking the time to invest in ourselves. Because as people will go $200,000 in debt for school, but won't spend $2,000 on a 3-day weekend with millionaires to mastermind. So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so back in 2013, we spent 25 grand. Okay, so we spent a lot of money. It was my husband and I, and that
Hmm.
didn't include your hotel, that didn't include your airfare, that was to attend the event. It was 3 or 4 days. It was through one of the guys who used to have the Flip This House show on TV.
Hmm.
And I was in a room with 300 people. It was a massive event. He used to do them like every other month. And it really changed my mindset. It when, like I said, I didn't know about hard money. I had no idea. I mean, for me, that was a game changer.
Hmm.
That in and of itself was a game changer. And then the other piece of it was asset protection. You know, how you don't do things in your name. You create entities for asset protection. So you protect your personal finances. And just seeing how other people think and how they leverage. And I made my money back. Initially, I didn't make my money back on fix and flips. I actually made my money back in the commissions that I was making from all of those projects and acquisition fees because we wholesale some of them. And so I JV partnered. So I made my money back in 6 months, and it wasn't necessarily from fix and flips, but I also built relationships that I still have that have been priceless that now we've worked. I've helped one of those guys raise capital for his first multifamily deal that he did 2 years ago. And it just really broadened my network. So I have a nationwide network. I also went and I implemented, right? A lot of people attend seminars and then they don't do anything. And that's
Hmm.
just not what if I want to spend that kind of money, you best be sure that I will find a way to make it back. And that's just how I'm wired. And the other thing, going back to what you're saying, is people will pay for college and they won't pay to invest in themselves, just like real estate agents, right? Most real estate agents, they'll pay, they'll pay like $100, $300, $400. But if you were to tell them, hey, here's a mastermind event for $5,000, they won't go. But they'll
Hmm.
spend 5 grand on Zillow leads, right? And so
Yes.
to me, that never made sense. And I attended a small private mastermind in December of last year, and that's when I also really learned you need to pay to play. I was
Yeah.
in a room with multimillionaires. Like, we're not talking 1 million, 2. One guy was signing the contract to buy his private plane who was sitting right behind me. Shorts and a t-shirt, you would have never known it. He's now a friend of mine. And so it's important, right, to get out of that box because I was the same way. I was completely against spending a couple of $1,000s to go attend an event or a seminar or a boot camp. But let me tell you, I've invested more probably in the last 10 months than I did in the last 10 years.
That's amazing. I want to ask you a little bit, how could we start shifting the mindset of the people within our industry so that they could start thinking for the future and realize that sticking sign in yards is going to make you so much money, but it's not going to give you anything passive?
So I think it's getting out there, right? And that's kind of one of my missions. So I wrote a book 'cause specifically for that. It's called Flip the Switch,
Hmm.
which I'm updating. And no one is out there teaching real estate agents how they can do this, right? Most real estate agents think my God, I need a ton of money. And they're thinking also, real estate agents, we try to write off as much income as we possibly can, right? They don't understand asset based lending. They don't understand creative deal structure. And no one's telling them. I spoke the first time I spoke at an event almost 3 years ago at this point. It was a law firm that asked me to, they're like, hey, will you come teach or flip the switch? And I said, sure.
Hmm.
I didn't even have it put together, but I was super passionate about what I was doing. And in the middle of my presentation, we hear the room next door. They're all rah, rah, and hoopla and all that. I found out after the event, there was a KW bold training going on in the room next door.
Hmm.
Great training, don't get me wrong, but they're all learning there how to cold call, how to chase leads, and how to get more business. And I stopped and I was in my room. I said, yeah, but you're in here learning how to create passive income, how to plan for retirement, how to plan for your future so you can get out of production, right? Or if you want to stay in production and you're doing well, but you want some passive income, there's so many ways you can do that. You can joint venture with somebody. You can be a private lender. There are so many ways to invest in real estate. And it's just giving them that exposure, which I don't think anybody is doing or has done. So I've made that my mission.
Yeah, and so for someone in my shoes, where I'm in license a year, but I know people that have been licensed less than that, and a lot of people that I know personally that watch the show are in the process currently of getting their license. How can you? What advice do you give to the people kind of in the beginning of their journeys in this real estate career as an agent, so that they can be ready for one day, hopefully leaving production and living their life beyond real estate as a sales agent?
So the first thing I will say, if you are not passionate about real estate, don't bother getting your real estate license. I actually a certified mentor where I'm at, and I had 5 real estate agents that are brand spanking new that thought this business was going to be easy. They got in. One of them asked me, "Oh, does this company pay for my business cards?" No. Being a real estate agent, you are creating your own business, and you need to understand that. If you're just going to go in it because you think you're going to make a quick buck, don't waste your time. Having said that, if this is your passion, if this is what you want to do and you want to help people, start to learn, right? Start to learn, what do investors look for? How do they think? Because it's a completely different process than working with your traditional buyer. And if you have a local RIA, it's a good place to start, a local real estate investing organization. We have several here in Atlanta. And just get plugged in, start to learn, what do investors look at? What's the lingo that they use, right? They use things like ARV and what's NOI, net operating income, and start to understand the language and start to familiarize yourself. And the key thing is you need to understand, at the end of the day, real estate agents are problem solvers, right? You either have someone who wants to buy a house or you have someone who wants to sell a house. It's easier on the buy side, but on the sell side, putting a sign in the yard does not always solve that person's problem. They could be in pre-foreclosure and they've got to be done in 6 weeks. How are
Hmm.
you going to help them solve a problem? You can't get a house on the market, sold and closed generally in 6 weeks. So how could you potentially help them solve that problem? Could you buy it yourself? Can you pull in an investor? Can you get their mortgage caught up and then take over the mortgage? And it's being a problem solver and truly finding solutions for people. And again, it's not anything that they teach you in real estate school. It's not anything that the brokerage firms are teaching you. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah, what would you say are some of the main differences between the traditional real estate world and the investor world? I know you touched a little bit on the lingo, but aside from that, what else is makes it so much more different, so much more harder to grasp for some people?
So it's being able to think outside the box, right? There's more than one way to skin a cat. And I'll give you an example, right? Right before the pandemic hit, I had someone that I had spoken to at this point, probably 4 years ago. Met her at a party. She had 2 properties she wanted to sell. She said, I'm not cut out to be a landlord. She had 2 rentals and she came to me about listing them. And she was upside down in both of them. And I said, look, your tenant giving you problems? She said, no. I said, are you cash flowing? She said, yes. I said, then leave them alone. And one had been vacant for a year. Fast forward to January 2020. And she called me before the pandemic hits and she said, hey, Lorraine, do you remember those 2 properties? I said, I do. And she said, okay, guy next door just put lipstick on a pig and he sold for 221. These are actual numbers. And I said, okay, great. Let me go take a look and I'll get back with you. So yes, he sold for 221, but he did more than put lipstick on a pig. It was not just new carpet and paint. It was a new kitchen. It was new bathrooms. And I said to her, okay, at this point, she owed 90,000. And I said, all right, at this point, you're not going to get 121 unless you put some work into the property, but maybe you'll get 110. And at this point, she's not upside down anymore. So yes, I can put it on the market and sell to her.
Mm-hmm.
I also gave her the option of saying, well, what do you want to do, right? Like, what is your objective? I said, because if you're open to it, maybe I'll buy it, but I need to see the property first. She said, okay, that would be great. And I explained to her there's a strategy that's called subject to, where you buy the property subject to the existing mortgage. Okay. And yes, that can pull the due on sale clause. If the bank finds out about it, it can accelerate the mortgage. I've never had that happen to me. And I don't know anyone that's ever happened to. Because at the end of the day, I think if the bank's getting paid, they're happy. That's all they care about. But you need to understand that is an inherent risk. I went out, I looked at the property, I went through it. She asked me, what did I think? And I said, well, it needs some work. And I was ready to make her an offer on the property. Never did I expect her to make me an offer to pay me to take over a cash flowing rental.
Mm.
At the end of the day, her concern was to not displace her tenant of 8 years who had been a solid tenant. She wanted to make sure that the tenant stayed in the property. If
Yeah.
I put that home on the market, I could never guarantee that someone would buy it and keep the tenant in it. That was her main concern. She's an amazing human because most people could care less. And so she actually paid me $2,500. She wanted to pay me more. I said no, and pay the closing costs. And I took over a cash flowing property that I got paid to take over, that I still have, that pandemic hit. I thought, oh my God, the rent's not going to get paid. Tenant paid the rent the entire time,
Mm-hmm.
and it has more than doubled in value. So I've increased my net worth at this point. So we took it over for 90. It needs some updating, but the last comp in the neighborhood that sold 2 months ago sold for 280.
Sheesh. That's
And
ridiculous.
I've collected rent for 2 years. And it's because I listened to her, right? I didn't go in there with, oh yes, let me get a listing agreement. Let me get a sign in the yard. I truly listened to her. And I even said to her, I said, what's going on? I know you have a son in the military. I know you have a grandson who's 7 or 8 by now. And she goes, yeah, he's 7. How do you remember all of this stuff? And it's because I took the time to listen to her, right? And I hadn't talked to this woman in 4 years. We connected on Facebook. We comment on each other's stuff, but she came back, right? And it's important for real estate agents to build relationships, to truly listen to what people are saying. What are their pain points and how can we solve their problem and potentially make it a win-win for both sides?
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things that most realtors get wrong is that they end up focusing on the transaction, especially starting off, or especially when taxes are due, or when major life bills are due, and they forget that as a fiduciary, our main responsibility, it says to put the client's best interest before ours, pretty much at any time and at all times. And a lot of realtors have this like the idea that they are doing them a favor because they're helping me out with the sale of the home, and sometimes they may need more time. Sometimes they need to worry about the tenant. And there's so many situations. What advice would you give in terms of listening? Because although this applies to real estate agents, this applies to both investors and pretty much anyone that speaks to humans in life. So how did you get so good at listening, and what do you do to develop that? Because as you know, it's so easy, especially when you triggered or when sparks start flying, to just start talking. But it's hard to take a step back to not just listen to ask questions, but to listen to actually seek understanding. So what kind of advice could you give there?
See, my mom used to always say, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I love to talk, right? Don't get me wrong, but sometimes you just have to, it's conditioning, right? You just have to step back and pause and I genuinely care about people. So, and I want to learn more about them, right? And what makes them tick. And actually, sometimes I think I'm a terrible real estate agent because they always say, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. And for me, it's been more about just let them talk. They'll tell you everything you ever wanted to know. If you just shut up, people will tell you things you would never imagine that they would. And I think that's the key. Just be cognizant sometimes to get vested in that other person that you're talking to.
So, like, what advice do you give to people so they're more willing to embrace making that genuine connection, as well as making the person on the other end more receptive as well and build rapport with them as well?
Gosh, you just go out there and just talk to people. I'm a very social person, so it's very easy for me to do.
Yeah.
But just go out there and just talk. When I first meet someone, like, what part of town do you live in? That's how I start almost every conversation, right? What part of town do you live in? What do you do? What do you like to do? What are your interests? And then just gosh, I don't know how else to answer that. Just start talking, right? And have the conversation. What brought you here? If you're an event, what brought you to this event? Or if it's a particular topic, why does this you're in an event like I'm in a self-storage syndicate, right? So now people ask me, what got you involved in self-storage? And I'll tell that story. And it's just creating that conversation and building rapport is the way to start.
Yeah. I feel like that rapport building, and I always tell this when I have my pre-shows on anyone, uh, people don't care about anything you have to say until they know how much you care or they can resonate with you as a person. And a lot of people spend this time, they have the fancy pre-listing package, they have the stats, they have everything in hand, and they come off as the professional. But s- most people nowadays, especially in real estate, because we're so heavily saturated with agents,
Yeah.
are just looking for a person. They don't want a professional. That's the last thing they want. They just want a person sometimes. And I feel like sometimes one of the unofficial hats that we wear as an agent is kind of like a therapist sometimes, because as you said, like in a lot of cases, you get people that when you genuinely listen and you build that space for them to talk, they kind of just start rambling, and then next thing you know about their kids, you know about their work, you know about the events they have planned. Sometimes they start inviting you to their events and stuff, and you build a lot of these genuine connections. And while we're on the subject of connections, how important have connections been in your journey and your growth, whether it's real estate, writing, speaking, investing? How important has connections been in carrying you throughout this journey?
Everything. My relationships and my network and everything. They've been everything from my business is all word of mouth. So my real estate business is all word of mouth. I don't pay for leads. I don't pay for Zillow. I don't pay for realtor.com. It's all from having built relationships or Facebook. I network a lot on Facebook. I'm in a lot of groups. I love to help people. I'm always trying to do what I can to help people. And a perfect example was probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago. My daughter's high school French teacher pinged me on Facebook. I haven't seen the woman in 10 years. My daughter graduated high school in 2012. Pinged me on Facebook that her mother-in-law needed to sell her house, and I was the first person she thought of to help with the sale. 10 years. Okay. But she's watched me, and I haven't even commented on her stuff. I didn't even know we were Facebook friends. Okay.
Yeah.
But she's kind of, I guess, been watching me all this time and, what I post and what I talk about. She sees me with my girls. And there's a familiarity as her sister-in-law texted me over the weekend. She said, I'm so glad to not be going through this with a stranger. I've never met her sister-in-law. She's in California,
Hmm.
but that meant the world to me, right? And so it is your network. I mean, now I know from having attended some of these events and these private masterminds, I've got someone who raises private capital. If I come across a great deal, he says, let me know. I'll help you raise the private capital. And it's having those contacts, right? And it is your network is your net worth. I don't care what anybody says. And going back to something you said just a couple of minutes ago, people do want to work with people. I want a listing. Same thing. Woman found me on a Facebook group, pinged me on Facebook. We had a conversation and she said, my husband and I are thinking about selling our home. I said, great. She's like, when can we meet? Set up an appointment. Now, all she said was, we're not sure. We're thinking of selling our home, but we don't know if we want to move. So in my mind, I'm just going to go meet her. until I got there, right? I did a preliminary kind of quick CMA. I pulled some preliminary numbers, but I just went up there to go meet with them. I walk in the door, I sit down, and she tells me I'm the fourth real estate agent that they are talking to that day. My insides are like, oh, shit. Right? Because I didn't go with the listing presentation. I didn't go prepared to do a listing presentation. I just talked to them. I wound up being there for 2 hours. Found out all about them, what they're looking to do, the credit, the husband and he said he had bad credit and what would it look like for them to get a new mortgage. I was there for 2 hours. They took me through the whole house. We got done. She pulled out the 3 folders from the other agents that had just been there. And she said all they did was put a folder under our nose and go through their presentation. No one talked to us. I got the listing that night. I said, well, let me go home. Let me do a deep dive into the comps because the neighborhood was split into 2 sections because I saw like a $200,000 price difference and got the listing being completely unprepared. And that's why I say talking to people is the key and listening to them.
So, Lorraine, you mentioned a lot about conversation. I feel like that's kind of like a lost skill in these day and ages. And not only conversation, but also comprehension. And that's kind of been like a topic we've been talking about kind of throughout this episode so far. What other skills that would you say are necessary and have helped you that aren't your traditional, your scripts or et cetera, et cetera?
See, the other thing is knowing, God, like I said, they've all been word of mouth. So it's all been, I get tagged on Facebook. I spoke, this is probably about, actually, I'm going to a listing presentation after this, probably about 2.5 years ago. And I had posted something about the market and what was going on and what was happening with prices going up as quickly as they were. And how if you were going to be a buyer, right, that you needed to be well prepared, make sure that you had all your ducks in a row, that you'd already talked to a lender, that you had already kind of gone through preliminary underwriting. But in this case, it was a buyer and someone tagged said, hey, so-and-so, you need to talk to Lorraine. And then that particular person pinged me on Facebook and I said, hey, can you tell me this person's name? And they said, yes, it's so-and-so. Unbeknownst to me, because it was a different last name, this was her son. And so I went out there and then talked to him, had a conversation. Then I got a call from his grandfather and had set an appointment to go look at a property. And his grandfather said, I didn't need to go. He said, you don't need to go. I've been a real estate investor for over 30 years and I'm going to help my grandson. It's his first property. And I said, okay, no problem. We'll never get in the way of family. You will never win that battle. And I said, okay, I understand. And then I called who was the young guy who was going to be my client. And I explained to him that just because his grandfather was going to go in there didn't mean that they were going to get an automatic 3% deduction, right? In this case, the buyer's agent commission was 3%. And yeah, I explained to him the whole thing. I said, your grandfather may be an investor for over 30 years. He doesn't know our contracts, right? Just because you're coming in without an agent doesn't mean that agent is discounting their commission to the seller. But I wished him the best of luck.
Mm-hmm.
Came back a week later, he lost the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I did the right thing. I just explained why it was important to have a buyer's agent, what I brought to the table, what that looked like, right? It's also contingencies, timelines, and all of that. And found him a property and we closed 30 to 45 days later. And so it's also knowing your worth, knowing when to step back, because like I said, I would have never won that battle. He is very close with his grandfather. And I just said, go, right? I wish you the best of luck. And like I said, a week later, it came back, said it was multiple offers. I lost the property and I should have listened to my mom and worked with you. And, now I have a listing appointment this afternoon because it's time for him to sell.
What advice would you give to a realtor who is time rich, cash poor, and a realtor that is cash rich, time poor, that are both completely new to real estate investing? What would be the suggestion for each of those people in terms of how they can get started in real estate investing?
So if you have more time than money, go and get involved in a local organization that is real estate investing. Or if you know someone who is a real estate investor, see if you can shadow them and always come from a place of value, right? Nothing irks me more than, hey, let me pick your brain. and someone's not bringing me any value. They're investors for a reason. They got there and now they're busy. So if you have more time than you have money, ask, can they mentor you, right? Can you intern for them? And just expect to get their knowledge in return. What can you do that will help them, that by doing that, you will learn how to do real estate investing, right? For those that have great successful businesses and they love what they do and they have a ton of money, but they want to learn about investing, find some investors that need private capital, right? You've got a huge successful business. You're making multiple six figures a year in commissions. How can you go help someone by being a private investor, right? Private investors, that interest rate is negotiated with what works for them and what do you want, but you're going to earn more than what you're earning in the bank rate, typically, right? Or go joint venture on a deal where you're 50-50 partners in. Whereas if you're just giving private capital, you're just giving the capital. If you joint venture, then you're involved. It's a 50-50 joint venture. I have done that. You're just as involved, maybe not as much, but you're involved in bringing the capital. You're involved in making some of the decisions, and you've partnered with that investor. Like I have done that, right? And we come to the table. It's like, okay, these are the design finishes. Yes, I agree. Okay, great. We're on the same page. Budget. We need this, and it's more of a collaboration. Those are the two, like I said, time. Go find someone that will mentor you that you can intern and bring value to. If you have money, either be a private lender or joint venture where you're also learning the business while you're helping to fund that deal, or contractors or your contacts or whatever that joint venture looks like.
Yeah. You dropped a lot of gems consistently, and there's kind of a lot to grasp for an hour. Where could people kind of go if they want to connect with you or find out more about what it is that you do, or whether it's through real estate or as an investor and joint venturing or your book that you mentioned earlier? Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah. So the best place is just connect with me on Instagram. It's Lorraine Beato, and you can DM me directly there. What else? That's probably the easiest. I mean, yes, you can Google me and find me, but I'm usually running around like a chicken without a head. And then you can also pick up my book. It's called Flip the Switch: From Real Estate Agent to Real Estate Investor. It's a whopping $14. But in there, I go through, what does ARV look like? What should your maximum allowable offer be on a project? Why is it that when real estate agents say calling all investors $20,000 below appraised price, why that is not a deal for an investor? Because that's the other thing. Most real estate agents say, oh, it's an investor, they're going to lowball me. They don't understand the numbers behind why it's a lowball number. Okay. And I'm updating the book. I'll have a new one out hopefully by the end of the year. But I go through 3 or 4 case studies. I talk about the two. So I bought another rental from that same lady last
Hmm.
year. That's how I got my lake house. So I have actual case studies on how I've acquired these properties, because it started as a real estate agent conversation, but ended up being to where I was the investor and bought the property.
Hmm. That's
And I think
amazing.
those are probably the two best things.
And so this is now my favorite part of the segment, because I get to hopefully catch you off guard a little bit. It's time for the final 4 questions. The first one is, what is the most impactful lesson that you've learned in life?
The most impactful lesson that I've learned in life. Oh gosh, there's so many. Just be genuine. I think be genuine. And if you don't know something, don't be afraid to say you don't know. I hate it when you see some of these people, and then as you drill deeper, like they look like they know everything. Don't be afraid to say you don't know. I do it all the time. If I don't know something, I will tell someone I don't know, but I'll go find out. Right. I think that's key, because so many people, especially with social media nowadays, they're out there pounding their chest, look at me, look at me. And when you dig deeper, there's no substance. And so
Hmm.
I think it's very important to just be true. Integrity is everything to me.
Well, that kind of answers my next question, was a little bit, was what is the most admirable trait that a person can have?
Your integrity, because once you've lost that, you'll never get it back. Integrity and trust,
Mhm.
they're key.
If you could, if you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
I'll tell you the one book that's been the most impactful to me. I talked about it yesterday, actually, is The Millionaire Next Door. Don't ever assume that you know somebody's story. Don't ever assume either because they're dressed well or they're not dressed well that you really know what's behind that. I'll do a quick story. Private lender that I know, he raised his capital. He was in the car with an Uber driver. He was telling the story yesterday. The Uber driver has 600 grand. He decided, oh, if you know where I can go invested, let me know. He's an Uber driver because he likes meeting people. Don't ever let a facade kind of, how do I say this?
Any preconceived notions, I
Yeah,
guess?
exactly. Don't have preconceived notions about people because you never know.
And to finish it off with the final question, what is the legacy that you're trying to leave?
So the legacy that I'm trying to leave behind, there's a couple. One of my main goals is to get real estate agents out of the grind of not being as good as their last commission check or having to sell houses till they're 70 or 75. I had that conversation 3 weeks ago, as well as empowering women to get into the real estate investing space because it is still a male dominated space. When I attended a mastermind last December out of 30 people, if you don't count the gentleman's wife, there was 2 women in the audience. That was it. In the storage syndicate that I'm in, I am the only female. And so it's empowering women to also understand, yes, you can be in the space. Yes, you can get in there and there's no reason that you can't. And then the rest is for my family, to leave a family legacy. I have a renovation I did in Europe that was my grandparents' house. And it was very important to me to keep that piece of property and that legacy in my family.
And that's amazing. Well, Lorraine, again, as I said, I really thank you for your time and your knowledge that you were able to pass along not only to me, but my audience as well. And I know that I've took a lot of nuggets and I know they definitely will be able to take a lot of nuggets away from this episode. So thank you once again.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.